Hey and welcome to a new Squid Game Season 3 tier list video. Just like in my last tier list, where I ranked Season 2, I'll be ranking most of the characters from Season 3 this time. I used a pre-made tier list that includes at least the most important characters who appeared in Season 3. To get a better overview and clean things up a bit, let's start by moving all the background characters into the random category. Alright, as you can see, we've already moved a big portion of the players into the random tier. Most of them are just players from Team O, who obviously represent societal decay and perversity, the greed for money that surpasses human life, even the life of a baby, just to satisfy their own selfish desires. I know there were a couple of characters listed under random who actually appeared in the final game, but to be honest, they were so irrelevant and uninteresting, except for two of them, that going into detail about them would just be a waste of time. Let's start with maybe the most important character in the entire Squid Game universe, the frontman. The frontman had an incredibly strong start in Season 2, with his reveal as former player and past winner of the Squid Game, as well as brutal suppression of Gi-hun's group's revolt. In Season 3 he takes on a new role, and his goal is just to break Gi-hun's will and belief in humanity, but also to see how he deals with the same questions and moral dilemmas he once faced himself. Gi-hun was the frontman's last shred of hope, his toy, his experiment, to prove that goodness in humanity always wins in the end. And while we did get quite a bit of screen time from him in Season 3, I think it was ultimately a bit disappointing. Too many unanswered questions were left hanging about his past, his position as frontman, which might be explained in a spin-off, and most importantly his relationship with his brother, who is essentially the only person he has left. These plotlines could have been explored with much more depth instead of wasting time on unimportant characters, and his individual connection to the VIPs could have also used more attention. It was cool to see, however, that in the end Gi-hun's sacrifice earned his respect, and out of that respect he passed on Gi-hun's legacy to his daughter in Los Angeles. Still, it wasn't enough for such a central figure, so I'm putting the frontman in C tier. Next up is our main character, Gi-hun. Gi-hun, probably the most beloved character in the series, goes through his darkest transformation yet in Season 3 and is reduced to just a shadow of his former self. After the death of his best friend and the collapse of his revolution, Gi-hun is completely broken. His moral compass and belief in the goodness of people are tested to the limit, and by none other than the frontman. Even though we don't know why the frontman made a different choice in his past, it's likely that Gi-hun, unlike him, had people around him who gave him strength to remain positive, whether it was his friends in Season 1 or later in Season 2 and 3. Still, this version of Gi-hun in Season 3 is by far the weakest. He spends 4 out of 6 episodes just sitting in a corner, frustrated and broken, barely contributing to anything, which made him boring and frustrating to watch. Only after Junhee's baby is born does he start to come back to life. In the final 2 to 3 episodes, we finally see the Gi-hun we all fell in love with, the Gi-hun who never gives up, stands up for himself and others, and ends up winning the Squid Game for a second time, but sacrificing his own life to give a new life. Rest in peace. Next is Jun-hee, and while she didn't play an active role, she was the emotional anchor between all the remaining good characters, and the one who ultimately brought back humanity in Gi-hun, through the birth of her baby girl. Her death was genuinely sad, because she was the last remaining symbol of goodness besides Gi-hun. She played a crucial role in helping him rise out of the darkness, and conveyed the message to the audience that the next generation must be protected. That hope lies with them. Still, I believe more could have been done with her character, so I'm placing her in B tier. Next is MG Coin, her ex-boyfriend, and I have to say, MG Coin had a surprisingly strong presence in Season 3. Contrary to my expectations, although that should have been obvious considering he killed Thanos, arguably the most beloved character from Season 2, he became the main villain of Season 3 and was essentially the only interesting character in the final game, which also shows how weak the final setup was. While I personally found him too weak as a villain, he was built up well over 3 seasons. His greatest weapon was manipulation. Just as he tricked people with his crypto coin, he also constantly lied to Junhee and turned players against each other in the final game. Because of his massive presence and importance, MG Coin belongs in A tier. Straight to S tier, hyun-ju, probably the most beloved characters in Season 3 or also Season 2, and she went out with a bang and proved that yes, trans characters can absolutely work when written well. Hyun-ju is the perfect example of a character who fits naturally into the story without the writing forcing her identity into the spotlight. Her death might be the saddest of the season, and she protected others like a big sister, fought for them in the various games, and was part of Gi-hun's resistance group. The most tragic part is knowing that she survived the hide and seek game, but the very humanity she represented ultimately cost her life in the end. A powerful, memorable character who definitely belongs in S tier. Next we have player 246, and honestly, he did basically nothing. He was only there to push forward No-Yul's storyline, so police tier. Then there's a random character who had one scene in the hide-and-seek game, and he confronted Yong-sik, and was really only there to show that Yong-sik couldn't bring himself to kill someone, proving he was more of a victim of the system than an actual villain. Police tier. Nam-gu is another villain alongside MG Coin, who was pushed into the spotlight in Season 3. I have to say Nam-gu really stepped it up. He couldn't replace Thanos of course, but he took on that chaotic, action-packed role and brought energy to the season. He went from being a sidekick to an absolute psycho who fans will always remember. His death marked the beginning of the show's decline, and since afterward it felt like nothing interesting was left. His performance was wild, intense, and definitely an S tier. Player 100. Easily one of the most annoying characters in Season 3, which ironically makes him one of the best. He's the embodiment of greed, an old man who values his ego and wealth over the well-being of even his own children, willing to sacrifice literally anything, even a baby. He was the ultimate survivalist, and he managed to build a group around himself and become its voice and leader to protect himself. He also showed his smarts, like in the hide-and-seek game, where he escaped both MG Coin and Nam-gu, and his death was extremely satisfying. He's annoying but essential, and therefore A tier. Min-su. What do we do with you? Man, that actually rhymed. Honestly, his entire presence in Season 3 was just irrelevant, and he enters the game, meets a girl, and supposedly falls in love with her after speaking maybe 2 sentences. It's like they spent a honeymoon in the Squid Game camp. A flop character who barely scrapes into C tier. The shaman, or the shaman woman, I'll keep it short, C tier. Super annoying, and her only role was to constantly foreshadow Gi-hun's descent into darkness, which almost happened to be fair, but that's all she brought, so yeah, let's leave her in C tier. The Sun. I think there was potential left unused here. He was clearly set up just for that one emotional moment in Season 3, and he fulfilled that role. But it felt like there could have been more, so C tier for him as well. His mother, a star of both Season 2 and 3. Over multiple episodes, she was the loving, caring mother everyone liked, and she met a heartbreakingly tragic fate. She knew her son wouldn't have the heart to kill, so she took the life of her own son to save another life. It was a guilt she couldn't live with. Her final mission was to reignite Gi-hun's spirit, because she knew that as a former Squid Game winner, he was the only one capable of protecting Jun-hee's daughter. A child who had come to symbolize all the sacrifices made so far, and her son's death, hyun-ju's death, Jun-hee's death, all of it rested on that one baby. S tier. Dae-ho. He played the coward and someone who pretended to be something that he wasn't, just to avoid being alone and stay part of the group. He's a very effective character though, because he visibly represents Gi-hun's slow transformation into a broken man. And technically Dae-ho wasn't wrong. Without the rebellion, more players might have survived or voted to end the game democratically, so B tier for Dae-ho. Park was mostly there to block Jun-ho for 3 seasons and tease the potential spin-offs, for example Squid Game Zero, a prequel that would explore the origins of the frontman and the recruiter, both of whom he's connected to, as we see through his buried guard uniform and office photos. Jun-ho. This one's tough. Honestly, he belongs in police tier, D tier, because across 3 seasons he was absolutely useless. A. He didn't accomplish anything, and B. His only confrontation with his brother boiled down to a single why, and that was it. Way too many unanswered questions and way too few answers. If he ran such a likable guy, he would be in D without question. Gyeong-seok is next, and he made probably the biggest leap in Season 3. Introduced as a naive and annoying character in Season 2, he became genuinely enjoyable in Season 3. He was the only one who actually progressed the plot through his investigations, uncovering details that Jun-ho failed to find in 3 seasons, and I'm glad he survived. A well-earned A tier spot. The Officer, the character who commands the Pink Guards and reports directly to the frontman. Through him we get a better sense of how Pink Guards are blackmailed and how data on players is collected, and he's also the main person behind the origin trafficking operation. His role was alright, but too many questions were left open with him. C tier. And last but not least, finally No-Yul, Pink Guard number 11. Already one of my favorites in Season 2 and honestly my favorite character in Season 3, a total badass. I would say the Daryl Dixon of Squid Game, if that makes sense. She not only shut down the organ trafficking ring and saved the father, but also took down the officer and burned the entire Squid Game archive. Then she flew to China to find her daughter, and she and the father are actually the only characters in the whole show who got a happy ending in the end. It was also great to learn more about the inner workings of the gods and how data is collected and processed, and still I think there could have been done more with her storylines. That said, because of how cool and action-packed she was, she belongs in S tier. That's it for my tier list of Squid Game Season 3. Do you agree with my rankings, or would you place some characters differently? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, until next time.